Welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Communities Committee. I would remind all attendees that the meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of members remotely and would appreciate and remind all members and attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. That also applies in the chamber. As members are aware, report number 331/23 item 11 has not been published in line with the required 3 clear days before the meeting. However, in accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 11.1.7, as chair of this meeting, I determine that the matter be considered as a matter of urgency, as the revocation of the closing order requires to be determined before the sale of the property can proceed. So we move on then to item 1, which is apologies and substitutes.
Yes, Convener, there's apologies from Councillor Fairweather and Councillor Melville, with Councillor Gavin Nicholl subbing for Councillor Fairweather. And we've got Councillors Cowdy, Proctor, Scott and Stewart that have joined the meeting remotely, and all other members are in the chamber.
Thank you, Fiona. Do we have any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? No. OK, we move on then to the minutes. And item 3. 3A, minutes of the previous meeting, submit for approval as a correct record. Agreed. And B, the Arbroath Harbour Joint Consultative Committee, submit the record of the meeting. Agreed. OK, we move on then to agenda item 4, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan 24-25 to 28-29. The report is going to be introduced by Catherine Johnson.
Thank you, Convener. The Strategic Housing Investment Plan is brought to committee on an annual basis, and it sets out the funding for the Scottish Government's Affordable Housing Supply Programme, which will be allocated over the 5-year period. The SHIP being presented today covers the 5 years from April 2024 to March 29, and we have a confirmed resource planning assumption for the first 2 years of that plan, but at this stage the funding is uncertain for years 3, 4 and 5. The SHIP itself is a working document, and the nature of housing development means it's often adjusted throughout the year. And this is reflected in the approval that's sought from committee in relation to the ongoing development of the plan. However, there are some specific risks associated with the delivery of the SHIP which need to be highlighted in relation to this report. The first is in relation to the challenges being faced by the construction sector, and you'll see from the report that this year we only had 1 new project proposal that was brought forward for inclusion, which is unusual compared to where we've been in the last 5 to 10 years. And anecdotal evidence, as well as information on new site starts, does seem to indicate that we're seeing a slowdown in the new build market, which may impact on sites which are already in the programme. There's also a specific issue that's arisen in relation to grant awards that are made by the Scottish Government, which introduces another element of risk to this plan. The Scottish Government recently introduced its Fair Work policy, which made it a requirement of any public sector grant recipient that it pays at least the real living wage and provides appropriate employee voice channels at a minimum. And this applies to any grant, not just in relation to housing. But it appears that the implications of this, particularly in relation to the employment of apprentices, has not been widely understood, and this has led to grant applications being turned down in recent weeks. I've had some detailed discussions with colleagues in the Scottish Government, and I'm reassured that while they're committed to delivering the Fair Work policy, they also want to keep the housing programme running, and so an exemption process is being introduced as a temporary measure. And our housing association partners are similarly focused on working on solutions to minimise the impact on delivery and the plan. However, we are aware of at least 1 site where construction has been paused temporarily as a result. Because the Affordable Housing Supply Programme provides funding on an annual basis with no opportunity for funding to be carried forward, delays can have an impact on future years of the programme, but we will seek to minimise these wherever possible. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll start with questions. Any questions for Catherine on the report? No? Anything online? Okay, move on to comments. Any comments? Not seeing any comments. Okay, we move on then to the recommendations. So the recommendations are to approve the content of the SHIP and to approve the ongoing development of the SHIP. Are these recommendations approved? Thank you, members. Then we move on to agenda item 5, the Housing Capital Monitoring Report. These are pages 68 to 83 of your papers, and it will be introduced by Catherine again.
Thank you. The Housing Capital Monitoring Report is presented today, providing an update on the actual and projected spend for the 23-24 period. You'll see that the report projects an overspend of £360,000, which represents about 3% of the overall budget. These are obviously live projects which are subject to ongoing change, and therefore this may not be the final position. And the October outturn actually shows a small underspend as it stands today. This report today also notes that the impact of Storm Babette may have implications on the capital plan. The current view is that any change is most likely to be in relation to the new build spend, as the ability to meet housing needs is where we're seeing the most pressure. We're making good progress in relation to matching households displaced due to flooding. However, there are some people who we have no accommodation options for that will meet their needs. So we're looking at bringing forward some budget from next year's plan into this year to increase open market acquisitions to meet this specific need. The Scottish Government have offered some flexibility in the grant awarded to purchases for these properties for this, and that will help us maximise the capital that's available. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Again, opening up to questions first. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Convener. I was going to ask a couple on the table one, but the commentary is so detailed that I won't bother. But if I can ask a two-part one, possibly, if that's okay. The internal upgrades, we're seeing it that there's been a delay because of the acceptance of the tender. That's fine, I get that, and Catherine, I think you've explained it, the construction industry's challenges at this point in time. Can I ask when that's likely to be accepted? And also the second part of it is, I noticed that Inverty House in Moneyfeith is marked as adjustable. I get that as well, but when is that likely? I know you can't give an exact date, that likely to sort of commence. Thank you.
In relation to the internal upgrades, that contract for bathroom works has now been awarded, but there was quite a delay in where we wanted to be at this point in the year, which is why there is a projected underspend showing in the budget. Similarly, the project in Inverty House is making good progress, and we are hopeful to be on site next year. There is a programme in place to make sure that we are able to develop those properties as soon as possible. So we have a timescale set for those.
Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Ned. Could Ms Johnson tell us about the smoke detectors in houses? Because last time that we had a discussion regarding this, they hadn't been completed at that point. And also, I'd like to find out about the aids and adaptions. We had delays due to, I think it was the occupational therapists. There was a lack of them. So could we get an update on where we are with that now, please?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the smoke detectors, we have been making good progress in relation to getting ourselves into a position where we're fully compliant with the provision of smoke detectors, and this has been updated regularly to the Scottish Housing Regulator. We've recently awarded a new contract in addition to the existing contract so that we can speed up progress in relation to these, and that contract should start soon. So we are now starting to see a much better position in terms of getting ourselves into a compliant position with those. In terms of the aids and adaptations, we have increased that budget significantly from where we were a year ago. We're now projecting around £1.2 million spend this year on aids and adaptations. So we are making a lot of progress again there in terms of getting through any backlog that had arisen over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor
Can I just ask you something there?
Sorry, just a second, Councillor Clark. Councillor Stewart, happy to proceed.
Yeah, can we get an update on the occupational therapists? Have they been increased to help with this? Thank you.
My understanding is that the Health and Social Care Partnership do still have challenges in relation to meeting the timescales that they would want to in terms of seeing people for an assessment. They have had issues with staffing and being able to get through the bulk of work that they have in the period of time, and there are still some delays there. But because we have increased our budget, we are now able to get people from the point that they have been assessed to a completed adaptation much quicker because we've increased the scale of that contract.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Convener. Hello, Catherine. Just picking up on something you just mentioned insofar as the tragic situation in Brechin and its surrounds, and thinking in terms of being able to house people. And I suppose, in some respects, I'm asking kind of two rhetorical questions, because I'm sure people want to be housed where they live, or where they did live. They wouldn't want to go too far away, because sometimes there'll be schools involved as well. So I suppose, given that, can I just ask then, when you're trying to get accommodation, is this mainly in the private market then? Because you mentioned having some monies. Would that be something you'd be looking at? Or is it still just about renting?
So I guess... So there's a couple of elements to that. The people that we need to rehouse, it's a mix of people that want to remain in Brechin and some people that are happy to be housed elsewhere, particularly if that allows us to provide an accommodation option for them quicker. So we're doing both of those things, depending on what people's preferences are. Where we need to potentially add to our stock is those people where the need is maybe a little bit more complex, particularly people that have a requirement for ground floor accommodation, and we don't have that within our stock. And the majority of those people require to be in Brechin because of support needs or other kind of vulnerabilities. So those people predominantly need to be rehoused in Brechin. And where we'll be adding to our stock, that would be about purchasing from the open market, but it would then be us providing a social rented property for those people rather than a private rented property. That's the aim that we're looking for.
I'm really pleased to hear that, Catherine. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Convener. Catherine, could you obviously maybe can't give me an exact figure, but how many acquisitions would you be looking to make? So how many families is it that are needing housed?
So I can't give an exact figure, but there are around 15 people that we have not been able to match to accommodation that's available. So it's those people that we will be looking to prioritise in terms of open market acquisitions. It may be that we don't need to make an acquisition for all of those people. There may be other alternatives. We're working with our housing association partners, and we're also looking at whether or not there are other options within our own stock. So it may not all need to be acquisitions, but that's the kind of number of people that we're looking at in terms of those that we don't have a solution for right at this moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it was just a question around the presentation of some of the numbers. And if you look at Table 2, and then you look at the Appendix 1 and the summary of the total housing spend amongst all the categories, the Table 2 makes no mention of government grant, and on table in the Appendix 1, the summary table says the Scottish Government grant is 0. But when you drill down to the details of the individual projects, if you take the very first one, Arbroath Timber Greens, you get Scottish Government grant of 3.7 million, 3.3 million for this the year we're in or whatever. So that seems to have been lost when we've summarised that figure. And I just wondered if that perhaps should make that clear. It looks like if you look at the summary tables, there's no Scottish Government grant, and there clearly is. So that was really just the question I had.
So the reason that we show it in that way is because it's the net figure that shows in the capital plan, because that is the amount of money that's been invested through the housing revenue account for those areas of spend. But as you say, the drill down shows that there is a portion of that that is made from Scottish Government grant, but we don't take that into account in terms of the overall capital spend from the council, because it is a grant element.
So that's just a net figure, sure. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. I saw Councillor Nicholl's hand. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. The recent fire in Montrose, were they council houses? If so, was the current fire smoke alarms fitted? It's just a question.
Yeah, the property that was affected by fire at the weekend was a council property. I don't have any specific details, but I'll be happy to provide more information when I can get an update on that.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions for Catherine? We move on then to comments. Any comments? Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Convener. Just very briefly, I'm delighted to hear from Catherine that Inverty House will be started, hopefully. Construction industry can, allowance, of course, in the next year or so. I didn't expect it to be so soon, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fotheringham. Any further comments? Okay, then we move to the recommendation. So it's recommendations 1 to 5. We're asked to review, note and note. Are we happy to review and note? Okay, thanks. Then we move on to agenda item 6, local landscape areas and Angus consultation draft. Jill Patterson is going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks approval for consultation of the proposed designation of local landscape areas in Angus and the accompanying background study, which is quite lengthy but sets out quite clearly the rationale and the approach to these. The landscape is absolutely important to Angus as well as Scotland. As well as national recognition, such as national scenic areas, many landscapes and scenery are also highly valued in a more local context, and these areas can be given a local designation of local landscape areas. The designation of these will protect and celebrate those landscapes within Angus which are special. The study which supports the designation provides detailed guidance on appropriate land management and development. Angus has previously not had local landscape areas and is one of the few areas in Scotland not to have this coverage. So it's great to see this work come forward and set the context for both the work identified in National Planning Framework 4 and the evidence report for the next local development plan. I've had my colleague Stuart Roberts here as their report author, and we're happy to answer any specific questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Do we have any questions for on this report? No questions. Any comment? Oh, Councillor Cowdery's coming with a sneaky one at the end there. Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a question for Jill. Obviously, in this report, it highlights that October, November 2018, public consultation was done and a total of 38 responses were received, which seems small to me. I know that we've had a chat about why that was, but I wonder if you could just explain a little bit more about that number, because I know everyone's really focused on getting as much public engagement on these sort of things as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdery. Yes, there was significant amount of activity which related to the engagement work on specifically the local landscape areas. In terms of social media reach, it was advertised on the Angus Council Facebook page and also the Angus Council Twitter account, both of which have quite significant followers. We also had a number of sharing across different specific networks. So Nature Scot, in terms of their own platform, shared that, Rambler Scotland, again through their own networks. And specifically, we had a number of targeted partners that we work with in relation to that, where direct engagement was sent out to them. The engagement activity as well was widely publicised, both through the Council's website, the Social Pinpoint engagement platform, which was in place at the time, and again shared through those social media channels, as well as direct contacts of our development plan mailing list at the time, which was around 600 contacts in addition to our key partners. I think it's one of those ones that sometimes when people are unhappy, we get the greatest response. So I'd like to think that, to actually designate and celebrate these areas has been welcomed positively, and that's been the approach going forward. Thank you.
Can I just come in with a supplementary?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess obviously, thank you so much for explaining that. It does sound like a lot of effort was put into getting that public engagement. I guess a key part of it, on page 97, it refers, the European Landscape Convention refers to the need for participation of the general public to be prioritised, which it sounds like, a real effort was made to do that. I wonder if possibly something like linking this with local biodiversity plan efforts would kind of help engage people in a more tangible way. I wonder if there's something to be said for linking specifically to those plans in engagement efforts going forwards.
Yes, I think absolutely, and it's good timing with where we're at. And as you'll see from the report today, it is to go for further consultation. So that's been the kind of initial work in terms of engagement in the preparation of this. And I know my colleague Stuart has been working hard in terms of setting up the communications plan and the platform and activity for the actual consultation on this itself. It's, as I say, good timing in that we have a lot of the biodiversity reports on the agenda today, so we can tally those up in terms of some promotional activity around some of the key successes and benefits that those plans have delivered. I don't, Stuart, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Thank you. Just be made aware of a technical gremlin that we've got in the chamber where our cameras have frozen. So I think we should call a 5-minute recess if we can mid-item. Is that possible?
Yes.
Can we call a 5-minute recess just to make sure we can get these cameras back in action, and we'll restart. So we'll restart at 26 minutes past. Okay.
If you stop the live stream just now, John.
Okay, everyone, we're back. Apologies for that break. There was some technical gremlins with the IT equipment. So we were in the middle of agenda item 6. We've had some questions and we move to Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, Convener. First of all, just like to welcome this report because there's a good scalp of this area which is in my ward actually. And on that, I'm kind of basing my question. Through the recent storm we had, a lot of the flooding was caused through the fact that streams and ditches hadn't been cleared. And I know that the SEPA policy, we were talking about biodiversity and species and everything, seem to, well, they feel that by sort of clearing the water courses, we're going to disrupt, you know, that sort of biodiversity. However, on one occasion, on the Melgin water, which is a outflow from the Lochlan Prathen, one of my constituents, his house was flooded. Had the stream been allowed to be kept clear, I don't think that would have happened. And I think the damage that the flooding did probably took away all the other natural species. So the question is, have we been in contact and, you know, with SEPA to try and come to some sort of sensible agreement whereby we can maintain what we've got, but at the same time keep the water flowing freely? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Proctor. We are on local landscape areas, and I'm not sure if we really have answers to this at the moment. So if Jill feels like she can answer it, or any part of it, then feel free to do so. But if not, can we take it away and get an answer for Councillor Proctor at another time?
Yeah, Councillor Proctor, it probably goes beyond the remit of the local landscape areas designation, so we will come back to you with specifics in relation to your query. What I would just re-emphasise is that it's not a protectionist policy, it's to help better guide land use management within these specific areas. So it would absolutely need to consider and balance on that, but we'll come back to you on your specific query raised.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions on this one? We move on then to comments. Any comments? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I just want to welcome the report very much and say thank you for the huge amount of work that's been done on it. It's gone into a lot of detail about certain areas that I haven't explored in Angus, so I will be exploring them because they're lovely. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Any further comments? Councillor Bray.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yes, the figures of participants in the consultation are disappointing, but I quite get the point that, you know, if people are upset about something, then they're much more likely to comment than they're quite happy with the whole thing. I do take that on board. But the other thing is that this was done on Social Pinpoint, and we've got a new platform now for consultations, and that, you know, the whole fact that we've got this platform and consultations are all kind of kept together, etc., I would hope that that would maybe make a difference to all consultation participation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Any further comments? Okay, then we'll move to the recommendations. The recommendations are that we approve, agree and note. Is that something that we'd like to do? Okay, thanks everyone. We move then on to agenda item 7, which is local nature conservation sites in Angus, initial phase of local biodiversity sites. Again, Jill's going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks approval for the designation of an initial phase of 28 sites, ranging from 3 hectares up to 160 hectares across Angus, as local nature conservation sites. The rationale behind these is to help protect these important biodiversity sites from inappropriate development and to ensure sympathetic land management by landowners through partnership working. Local nature conservation sites can comprise of local biodiversity sites and local geodiversity sites. Currently, As at present, prior to this work being undertaken, there are no specific local biodiversity sites in Angus, and this was part of the rationale for undertaking the work. There were 2 local geodiversity sites which were actually designated back in the 1990s. And work on the local geodiversity sites does form part of this work, and looking at that going ahead, and that will be reported as part of the next phase of work. So this particular initial phase concerns the identification of specifically local biodiversity sites in Angus. The overall methodology was agreed in partnership with Nature Scot to prepare the guidance around this, and partnership working was also undertaken with Perth and Kinross Council in terms of the approach, which aligns quite well with our work on the Teesside Biodiversity Partnership. This initial phase of sites were selected from a combination of records from a previous Scottish Wildlife Survey in the 1990s and expert panel knowledge. Specific survey work was undertaken on the ground, and this was delayed somewhat via COVID, but we have now managed to complete all that survey work. And that survey work has been rigorously assessed by an expert panel. This initial phase, considered suitable for designation as local nature conservation sites, are listed in section 5.1 of the report, and the detail behind these is provided in the main appendix. Survey and assessment is currently underway for a second phase of candidate sites and will be reported to committee in due course. I have report authors Stuart Robert and also colleague Anna Cowie to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jill. Do we have any questions? No. Okay, we move on then to comments. Any comments on the report? No, no comments. Then we move on to the recommendations. Oh, sorry, Councillor Proctor, you're hidden behind my laptop, so I can't quite see you. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, Convener. Yeah, I just like to welcome this report and thank everybody, who actually put it together, because I think it's the first time that I have seen the detail of sites and everything else listed in one document. Again, as I say, a lot of it in my ward, but I really do congratulate all the officers and people who put this together. Really is an excellent document and something I think it will, bear the fruit of time. It'll benefit people in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Okay, we move on then to the recommendations. The recommendations are to approve the designation of the 28 sites, no further sites may be brought forward, and that the sites designated in option 3 will be considered material and determination of planning conditions. Do we approve the recommendations? Okay, thanks everyone. We move on then to agenda item 8, which is the Statutory Biodiversity Duty Report on delivery 21 to 23. This starts on page 204 of your papers. Jill is again going to introduce this report. Thank you, Chair. All public bodies in Scotland are required to further the conservation of biodiversity when carrying out their functions, and as such have a biodiversity duty to fulfil. The Wildlife and Natural Environment Scotland Act 2011 further requires all public duties to report every 3 years on how they comply with this biodiversity duty. This report is required to be submitted to Scottish Government by the 1st of January 2024 to cover the progress we have made and what we have achieved as a council during it. The detailed report provided in Appendix 1 demonstrates how the Council has complied with its biodiversity duties for this period, and I'm delighted to say there's some fantastic successes in there that really show that Angus punches above its weight in relation to this area. Scottish Government set out a guidance note to local authorities on how to structure our statutory reporting on biodiversity, and the report follows this specific format. Section 5 of the cover report in front of you proposes key areas of focus for future biodiversity action to continue this activity and success in Angus. My colleague Anna Cowie is available to answer any specific questions you have. Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions on this one? Any comments? Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you very much. As Environment Spokesperson for the Administration, it's really great to see so many reports focusing on nature and biodiversity, particularly because of the nature emergency that we know we are facing not only in Scotland but the rest of the UK. So as others have stated, I'm so happy to see that a real focus and priority is being put on these issues. And as others have also said, I really would like to thank officers, because these reports are incredibly detailed and, you know, as really will bear fruit in the long run. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdery. Any further comments? Okay, then we move to the recommendations. It's recommendations 1 and 2. We're asked to approve the contents and approve the publication. Are we happy to do so? Okay, thanks everyone. We now move on to agenda item 9, and it's the Tayside Local Biodiversity Action Plan 2016 to 26 Progress Report. Starts on page 267 of our papers, and again, Jill's going to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. We have a fantastic progress in terms of biodiversity work in Angus, with the first Tayside Local Biodiversity Action Plan published in 2002, which guided the conservation and enhancement of the region's natural heritage for 14 years. After a year-long stakeholder consultation period, this second 10-year plan was developed and published in 2016. The report in front of you today highlights the progress made on the delivery of this second plan. Although Tayside-wide, this initial interim review focuses on specifically the Angus progress from between 2016 to 2023 and any appropriate cross-boundary projects. Progress on its delivery has been significant, and I'm sure you'll see that from the report, with a wide range of projects occurring across Angus. 116 or 75% of the total overarching actions have now been taken forward, and 573 sub-actions, and 60% of those are being progressed. Approximately 96 partners are engaged in the delivery of these actions right across the partnership area, and that's fantastic efforts of both officers and all our partners in taking these forward, and I think demonstrates the positivity and enthusiasm for this work in Angus. Examples of key achievements and case studies are provided in section 4.4 of the cover report before you. These include some case studies such as the Small Blue Butterfly Project, the Angus Coastal Festival, and the Rottleburn Restoration, which earlier this year won a UK-wide award for the River Prize. The production of the next Local Biodiversity Action Plan will add legacy and ongoing value to this current plan. My colleague Kellyanne Dempsey is available if any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions on this report? Nope. Any comments? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I guess I'm a wee bit of repute to acknowledge in these 4 reports there's a huge amount of work going back several years, and it's a good body of work, and even if there's not a lot of questions today, these are reports that we can all refer back to as a reference point and explore if we want to explore it. But I mean, they answer a lot of questions we occasionally get from constituents, and I think that's useful to have that data available. And obviously we've got points of contact, we've got the deeper questions we want to ask, but I just would like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. And you're in to said report. Are there any further comments? Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you. Yeah, just following on from what Bill said, I just wanted to thank officers specifically for a really, really interesting and thorough briefing that we as councillors had on biodiversity and nature issues in Angus recently. So that was a briefing that a lot of us attended, and we had a lot of our questions answered then. So as Bill says, although you know it may not look like we're asking a lot of questions today, I think that's because a lot of us have already asked those questions and had really, really thorough answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdery. Councillor Proctor.
Convener, yeah, I'd just like to echo what's been said about the report. Great. And I think it makes us all, irrespective of our grumps and moans, but I think it makes us all grateful that we live in such a wonderful place as the County of Angus. Thanks, all concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Okay, any further comments on the report? Okay, then we move to the recommendations. The recommendations are to note the contents of the report, note the challenges and opportunities identified, and approve the commencement of scoping work. So be happy to approve the recommendations. Okay, fantastic. Right, Jill gets to leave the table, and we move on to pavement parking prohibition. It's item 10. It starts on page 300 of our papers. I've got a special request before we go in to discuss this paper. And it feeds in for all elected members. So if you can tell your colleagues as well, if you do happen to have any individual cases where you think streets should be exempt or should not be included, or however it works, please don't bring them up in the meeting necessarily, but feed them directly into Graham Daly's team, who will look at them. And as you know from the report, there are criteria that these are assessed upon, and they will be considered. What would be really terrible for us today is to basically have all elected members listing about 20 streets that constituents have contacted us on. So if we could feed in directly in another forum, you can still tell your constituents you've raised them, and we can proceed with the meeting. So thank you. Graham's going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Convener. The final regulations under the Transport Scotland Act 2019 will be published next month that will prohibit pavement parking, double parking and parking at drop curbs in Scotland. This report updates committee on the road assessments that have been undertaken relating to the pavement parking prohibitions. The committee are asked to consider and approve the roads where exceptions to pavement parking prohibition and double parking prohibition will apply. The report further seeks approval for the preparation and making of an exemption order to exempt roads from the forthcoming national footway parking prohibition. Once orders have been finalised and associated lining and signage installed, we will be in a position to begin enforcement, and as detailed in the report, it is proposed enforcement will be undertaken by the community enforcement wardens, and this will form part of their parking enforcement patrols. As the convener said when he was introducing the report, we have kept to a set criteria that aligns with national guidance when undertaking assessments for footpaths that are exempt. But as again the convener highlighted, if there are specific streets that you feel you would like us to recheck, then you are invited to get in touch with myself directly, and I will take this to the traffic team and provide feedback to you.
Okay, thank you, Graham. We've got any questions on the report? Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, a note from the report, there are only a few of the towns in Angus that's listed there. Are there plans to extend that to other towns, or is that the basis of the lists completed now, unless they get comments from individual elected members?
Yeah, Councillor Stewart, I can confirm that the assessment has been undertaken for the entirety of Angus. And just to make clear as well is that the regulations and the prohibition on pavement parking will apply across Angus. So it is a relatively small number of streets, and not all towns are affected in terms of exemptions. So I can confirm this is an exhaustive list that covers the whole of Angus.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Convener. Notwithstanding what you said earlier on, I received an email just before the meeting, actually, and it's addressed to one of the officers. And all I want is if Graham could just give agreement that this will be looked at, and that maybe a meeting with the residents of that particular street could be held in due course.
Yes, I think that aligns with what both myself and Convener said at the beginning. I think we've fully recognised that after we'd undertaken these assessments, there was almost an inevitability that what would be forthcoming is from constituents and from members a request for us to, if you like, double check our workings on this. And we recognise that we've got a duty to do this. So if it is directed to myself or officers within my team, then I'll make sure that suitable feedback and engagement is undertaken.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that, Graham. And I do appreciate the road in question, and I know very well what's being proposed. There would have to be some other engineering to make it possible. But thank you very much for that assurance. Grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Convener. I just wonder if we've got a date that we're aiming for. I mean, I get a lot of constituents that are, really delighted that we're bringing in pavement parking because it does hamper so many people. But I've noticed that we've not got any sort of date as to when this will start. And also, I'm going to do 2 questions, sorry, convener. Also, I'm just a little bit concerned as to how you're going to manage to cover all of this, because we only have 9 enforcement wardens, as far as I knew a couple of weeks ago. So, and I think a lot of the pavement parking, a lot of the complaints certainly that I get are in sort of more housing areas, so residential areas, but that hampers people going past with wheelchairs or mobility scooters or pushchairs. So, how are we going to cover the whole of Angus? That's kind of a concern. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of the first question, when will it begin? The reason we haven't provided a date is just due to the process. We need to propose the orders, and the statutory process is that we will publicise that, so that will be on our website, in the local newspaper. We'll put on like alarm posts in the streets affected. Now, there's an opportunity for people to provide representations, and we need to consider those representations. So in theory, and again it's detailed in the report, if these representations aren't withdrawn, we need to come back to committee, and in that eventuality that would delay matters to an extent. So again, when the report was written as well, we were waiting on confirmation in terms of when the enforcement regulations would be introduced. That is is more confirmed now, and the indicative date is actually 11th of December to be precise. So what I would say is that we will aim to do it as near to the beginning of next calendar year as possible, but it will be dependent on the orders going through and then the associated works, the line and associated signage. But I would hope there isn't too much of a delay in terms of into the new year. And I would agree with you that there are many people who are looking forward to this being introduced, and it's something that's been put forward for a number of years. In terms of your second question, which was how will we cover, with the staff resource in terms of the wardens. Now, what I would say is that currently we need to cover the whole of Angus with our wardens, so it's something we're already doing. It is a challenge, and it is getting the balance right in terms of staff resource versus making sure that we are enforcing proportionately across Angus. I think we will be able to, as I said, integrate this into the existing patrols, because we do already go into all towns, the wardens. There might be a degree of intelligence-led, and if we know there are the situations, but I don't anticipate this is really deploying our wardens off the beaten track, so to speak. Here, I think it would be just a minor realignment of their patrols as to any major change, because as I said, we already patrol all of our towns, so there might be a certain degree of tweak based on the intelligence we have, but I don't anticipate a major issue in terms of how we approach this from a staff resource perspective.
Okay, Councillor Scott, you've still got your hand up. Are there any other questions for Graham? Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just on the back of what Ms Daly's just said, will we take an approach, as we've done with some other regulation we brought in, of a first hit warning sort of thing, and then going to fines, just because a number of people will, as is natural, not pick up the message straight away and almost need to be given a first warning. I just wondered if we've done it with other things, would we do it with this as well?
Yep. First of all, I would say that there is a national campaign that is due to start, in fact, this week, in terms of the spreading awareness that this is now the law in Scotland in terms of pavement parking. We will back that up with our own communications coming out direct from Angus Council to spread awareness. But I would agree with you, despite that, I think there's inevitability again that people will simply be unaware. What our intention is in terms of the application is a form of soft or sensitive start, where I think and it will be a relatively small period of time, but where we will issue just something like a advisory note, but that will be a very short period of time, and then we will fully enforce. But yeah, taking cognizance of what you've said, Councillor Cheapman, I would agree with you. That is the wise way to go, and that is our intention.
Okay, so any further questions? Nope, we'll move on then to comments. Any comments? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. And your remark earlier about getting in touch with Mr Daly, that actually works, because I did it, and it worked. I got some information. But for me, this is something long awaited. We're very proud in Angus of our assistance dogs organisation here in Forfar. The dogs make the lives of visually impaired people greatly enhanced. And I think if we're going to make our pavements that bit easier for the trained dogs to negotiate, that's just one sector. And I would add to that, that if we keep allowing huge traffic to just descend on pavements, the tactile paving that is there for people like that, impaired vision, gets just absolutely knackered. It's maybe not a word that people like to hear, but it's true. It gets completely shattered. And then you have people in buggies, be they young and old, pushed or used themselves, wheelchairs, etc. Everybody has to negotiate round somebody deciding to go into some place for a couple of minutes. So I was pleased as well, Mr Daly, to hear that we're going to use a carrot and stick approach to a certain degree. But for me, this has to happen. It's long overdue. It's good to hear that there's a nationwide approach, but we're part of that, and it has to start somewhere. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Clark. Any further comments? Nope. So we move on then to the recommendations in the report. We have recommendations 1 to 7. It's to note, approve, 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 and approve. So are we happy to approve recommendations 1 to 7? Thank you, everyone. Okay, we move on then to the final item on today's agenda, which is item 11. It's the revocation of a closing order. It's on page 316, and thank you, Graham, for that. Catherine's going to present here.
Thank you, Convener. This report is seeking the removal of a closing order for a residential property at 74 High Street, Montrose. The closing order was made in October 1977 and the property has been uninhabited since. The property has now been fully upgraded and an inspection has been carried out by environmental health officers, which confirms that it now meets the tolerable standard. The property is in the process of being sold, so this will hopefully bring the property back into use in a prominent location in Montrose town centre.
Thank you, Catherine. Just open up to questions and comments. Does anybody have anything on this one? No. Okay, then we move to the recommendations. Recommendations on agenda item 11 is to recommend that the committee make an order revoking a closing order on the property at 74 High Street. Do we agree to make an order? Agreed. Thanks very much, everyone. And before we go, I just wanted to... No, before we go, I just keep the live stream going. I wanted to make note of something that we've not quite managed to do yet, which was note the retirement of Walter Scott. This has not formally been done in a council chamber meeting yet. And I've not prepared any words for it because I thought it was one of those things that we should know because we've noted others. But he was such a good officer in terms of working with me as an opposition member and as the convener of this committee. His commitment to the council was incredible and he attended everything under the sun in his shorts and t-shirt when he's riding that bike of his. Unbelievable. And in terms of the support that Walter gave me on things like the outside bodies, I just had no concept of the time that man had for people to do with his work and everything that he did. In terms of all of the things that he did at the council, he spun so many plates. And from my personal perspective, he'll be a colleague that's really, really missed. And I know I'm talking like he's not here anymore, he's retired, but genuinely the impact that he had on me as an elected member and my relationships and how I work with officers, it was probably defined by how Walter worked with me. So I just wanted to sort of say that I congratulate him, if that's the right word, on his retirement. I wish him all the best on behalf of Angus Council, and I hope to see him at some point in the near future, even if it's just passing by on his bike. Does any other members have anything on that one? Councillor Duff.
I would agree with a lot of what you said there, Walter. It's, for me personally, as a Montrose member, his role in coastal erosion and all the work that's gone on there for multiple years, he was very much the font of knowledge, which I certainly picked up a lot from him, and he had a great deal of knowledge in that area, and I think I wish him well in his retirement, but that's left us with a big knowledge gap at the moment, I think. So yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. I mean, I worked closely with Walter for 10 years on the flood management group, both as a member and as convener, and also with TACTRAN. And everything you've said is absolutely right. Walter was a really hard-working officer, could be relied upon to give good advice. He listened and gave advice to everybody, and sadly missed in the council. And I do wish him well.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Councillor Bray.
Yes, well, thanks, convener. And as your vice convener, I would concur with everything which you and others have said about the great Walter Scott. Thanks.
Okay, if that's everyone, call the meeting to a close, and thanks very much, everybody.
John, if you stop the live stream.